Naval power was important to both the Allied and Central powers during World War One, primarily because control over the seas would allow nations to secure trade routes that would supply them in war. This would motivate both sides to develop not just the numerical strength of their navies, but to also develop new naval technologies that would give them an edge over their rivals. Naval warfare in World War One was mainly centered on the use of blockades. Through force, Allied and Central Power fleets would attempt to cut off rival supply lines to gain the upper hand. Naval supply was particularly important for both the British and the Germans, largely because of their location within Europe. Britain was historically dependent on maritime trade and imports and needed it to survive, while German access to the sea was limited to the North Sea, which was easily blockaded by the British fleet. As supply was important, especially in the stalemate trench battles in Europe, it became vital to develop methods to both break through enemy blockades and to reinforce friendly ones. The development of naval technology will first begin with general improvements on battleships. Compact steam turbines were introduced, resulting in higher ship speeds for less weight. Coal was replaced with oil as a fuel source, providing 40% more energy per volume. New gyroscope stabilizer systems also enable greater accuracy from ship guns. The use of radio was also introduced to naval ships, including merchant ships. These allowed a far greater degree of communication between them, allowing them to effectively coordinate their movements and their attacks. However, one disadvantage was that radio messages could be intercepted by an enemy and had to be encrypted. The possibility of interception led to the development of naval intelligence on both the British and German sides of the war. The British set up Room 40, a crypto-analysis effort that deciphered German codes, while the German equivalent was E-Dines. However, they were less successful and could only occasionally decipher British communications. The war was also the first use of dreadnoughts, which the British introduced in 1906. These ships had a uniform main battery heavy caliber guns. Instead of trying to fit many smaller guns on one ship, dreadnought design focused on increasing the power of each gun by both increasing the caliber and barrel length to increase muzzle velocity. They could fire at greater distances, and improvements allowed for greater rates of fire. They were also equipped with additional bulkheads that protected against torpedoes. These would render pre-dreadnought ships obsolete and would revive the arms race as each side tried to produce more dreadnoughts to close the gap. However, these ships had one flaw. By replacing smaller guns with bigger ones, it loses its ability to combat small, fast-moving targets, especially torpedo boats. These were small ships that carried torpedoes that could overwhelm bigger ones with slow guns. New models were considerably faster than before, prompting both sides to introduce a torpedo boat destroyer. These were similar in design, however they were armed with small guns instead. They would defend larger ships that could not attack small targets. Newer destroyers eventually ended the torpedo boat danger, and torpedo boat destroyers would then be repurposed to defend convoys against a new growing threat: submarines. Submarines were capable of sneaking past the security perimeter of convoys underwater, allowing them to strike bigger ships safely with torpedoes. Submarines could also bypass blockades. However, these early submarines were technically submersibles, as they could only submerge for short periods of time due to their diesel engines. The German Navy were pioneers of submarine warfare and used U-boats to disrupt Allied shipping lines. While the British favoured the use of large battleships to blockade the North Sea, Germany used U-boats to destroy Allied merchant ships with torpedoes. By April 1916, a staggering 800,000 tons of cargo was sunk. The U-boat threat would prompt the development of sonar. It involves sending out waves of sound into the water and listening for echoes produced when the sound reflects back. This allowed the detection of underwater threats. Sonar, however, was at its infancy during the war, and only by 1918 did Britain and France produce a prototype. There was also an extensive use of sea mines by both sides to enforce blockades. They posed a major threat to any vessel, making their use particularly controversial. Sea mines were also used defensively along coasts, preventing larger capital ships from getting close enough for coastal bombardment. In summary, naval warfare in the First World War became smarter and more efficient, moving towards the use of submarines and communication interception. Direct ship-to-ship combat would also start to decline from this point. While technologies such as radio and sonar were at its infancy, it would soon develop into highly significant tools of naval warfare that would be used in World War II.